Hi guys, today we're going to talk about how sometimes writers will show the perspective of more than one character. Okay, we're going to talk about how they can show the different perspectives through both primary and secondary characters. For instance, in Nim and the War Effort, obviously we know our main character in the story is Nim. She's the main character, but we also have secondary characters. She's primary. She's the main character. She's who the story's mostly about. But we do have some secondary characters. Mostly we have Grandpa, and we have the boy that she is going against in the contest, okay? Those are the two secondary characters. I'm going to read a little bit, pages 30 and 32 of Nim and the War Effort. And I want you, while I'm reading, to think about how Nim feels about winning the newspaper drive. And I also want you to think about how Nim's grandfather sees the situation. Does he have a different perspective on it than Nim? And if so, how is his perspective different? Okay, why do you think their perspectives are different? Okay, let me exit out of this real quick and pull up those pages. Outside the Washington Irving School, the police officers were just getting into the police car in the paddy wagon. Nim rushed out to wave goodbye, shouting, thank you for helping me." It was late. Nim hurried home, pulling her empty wagon. She almost ran into Garland Stevenson, making his last trip before the end of the contest. His trap wagon was overloaded, and he had to steady it as he pulled it slowly toward the auditorium. With a self-satisfied grin, Garland said, "Did you bring any more newspapers?" Nim smiled mysteriously. "A few." "Did you see how big my stacks are?" asked Garland. "I saw them." "What time is it?" "It's too late for you," said Garland. "And by the way, why don't you get a watch that works? It would tell you it's time for me to win the contest," he added with a laugh. Nim watched from the corner and chuckled as Garland opened the auditorium door. Nim raced up the street with the empty wagon clattering behind her. She knew it was late, but she knew all would be forgiven when she told about winning the newspaper drive. Grandfather was waiting in front of the house. Nim ran happily to him, ready to share her good fortune. She saw that Grandfather was very angry. "You were seen riding in a police paddy wagon through Chinatown. You are late coming home. You have worried your mother and grandmother," he said sternly. Nim nodded, her head lowered. She didn't say anything. Grandfather continued, "I heard you and that boy fighting over the newspapers this morning. I heard what he said about winning." Nim looked up at him, quietly protesting. "But I won." "Winning isn't everything," Grandfather replied. "You have shamed our family. You have brought disgrace on all of us and our ancestors just to prove that boy wrong." Nim bowed her head again, totally dejected. Grandfather continued, "Go upstairs and sit and reflect on what you have done. I will speak with you again after you have thought about it." Nim nodded with tears in her eyes. Obviously, Grandfather had a very different perspective on winning that newspaper drive than Nim did. Nim was excited and she was proud of herself. He was not quite so excited and definitely not proud. He felt that Nim did this just to prove him wrong for selfish reasons. And Grandfather's perspective, because of what he saw, was very different than Nim's perspective. He didn't understand Nim and why she did that, okay? We also have a different perspective with Ricky Tikki Tavi. In Ricky Tikki Tavi, at one time, he saves Teddy from a snake. Teddy's mom is overjoyed and excited and so proud and happy with Ricky. Ricky Tikki, not so much, right? He doesn't see what the big deal is. He's like, "What? I'm a mongoose. Mongoose kill snakes. That's just what we do." He had a very different perspective on this saving. He didn't even consider himself having saved Teddy. He's just a mongoose that killed a snake because that's what mongooses do. He didn't understand or see why why Teddy's mom was quite so excited about that. So as you guys can see, authors often write in different perspectives of the same problem. This doesn't necessarily mean there's two different characters talking. Neither of these stories did we change point of view. Perspective and point of view are not the same thing. Perspective is how a character's feeling about a thing, whereas point of view is who's telling the story. In this case, the point of view did not change in either of these stories, but we still saw two different character perspectives throughout each of these stories. That's the difference between those two things. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later. Awesome job, guys.